There's a moment when the noise finally fades, and what's left isn't peace, but shame. Not the kind that comes from doing wrong, but the kind that comes from doing nothing. You know that silent ache, the one that whispers, "You should have moved, but you didn't." Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll understand why Carl Jung believed your undisciplined self isn't lazy, it's exiled, and it's begging to come home. We rarely speak about the quiet devastation of watching ourselves break the same promise day after day, saying tomorrow while knowing deep down that tomorrow never arrives, passing a mirror and feeling resentment toward your reflection, not because you hate yourself, but because you no longer believe yourself. You say you'll start, you say you'll change. For a moment, you even mean it. But by morning, that version of you is gone, replaced by the same tired, restless wanderer. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." What if avoiding discipline isn't just procrastination, but a form of spiritual rebellion, a rejection of your future self? What if the distracted, tired, inconsistent version of you isn't the real you, but the one you've rehearsed through repetition? If this stirs something inside you, don't just listen. Awaken. Carl Jung heritage exists for the parts of you no one else dares to speak to. Because here's the truth, discipline isn't about effort, it's about identity. You won't become disciplined until you stop identifying as someone who needs to become it. It may sound paradoxical, but once you grasp this, the war you fight every morning begins to make sense. Jung believed most people never truly become who they are. Not from lack of trying, but from living estranged from their own potential. They chase change externally, a new job, new habits, new routines. But transformation begins within. You don't need more, you need less. Less escape, less noise, less avoidance of the one sacred truth. Responsibility. Not responsibility to others, but to your own becoming, to the sacred contract between who you are and who you were meant to be. That's where discipline lives. Not in checklists or 5 a.m. alarms, but in devotion. Think back to when you felt most alive. It wasn't during pleasure or rest. It was when you were aligned, when you kept your word, when you became what you once doubted you could. That feeling wasn't pride, it was integrity. Jung understood this well. The psyche craves unity. The more divided you are, saying one thing, doing another, the more your subconscious rebels. You're not lazy, you're living in conflict. Lack of discipline isn't the disease, it's the symptom, a symptom of a divided soul. One side builds, the other destroys. One dreams, the other hides. And each day you repeat the cycle, you widen the split. Jung warned that what you resist persists. The parts you abandon don't vanish. They become your shadow. Inside that shadow lives the version of you that is disciplined, ambitious, structured, and powerful. The one you've buried, not out of weakness, but out of fear. Fear of your own strength. Because once you embrace it, once you truly commit, you'll have no one left to blame. You won't be able to hide behind potential anymore. The time for almost becoming is over. Now you'll have to become proof. And that's terrifying, because once you become proof, you can't unsee your destiny. You're either rising or decaying, growing or retreating, and the world will witness both your ascent and your collapse. But here's the truth. The collapse has already begun. Every time you break your word, skip your plan, hit snooze, or reach for the easy comfort of distraction, you're dying a little inside. Not a physical death, but a spiritual one. You don't feel drained because of your responsibilities. You feel drained because of your guilt. Deep down, you know this version of you is not who you were meant to be. So listen carefully, not with your ears, but with your bones. Discipline isn't something you add to your life. It is life's immune system. It protects you from spiritual decay, from mediocrity, from the quiet tragedy of becoming a person who owns everything except himself. And when something in this message cuts deep, comment. because your healing might be the spark someone else is searching for. Remember this: there was a time you wanted this, before the distractions, before the burnout, before you stopped believing in your own fire, but your spirit didn't forget. It's been waiting patiently for you to return to the forge, the sacred place where your discipline was born. And we'll go there, we'll relight it. But first, we must go back to the beginning, to the origin of your undisciplined self. Where did the fracture begin? Why do you resist structure? Jung's archetypal theory reveals that beneath your procrastination lies a buried identity, one that learned to associate order with pain. Because you didn't lose discipline by accident, you were trained out of it. Slowly, repeatedly, through small betrayals, by others and by yourself. At some point you began to tell yourself a story that you're the person who almost changes, the one who nearly follows through, the one with potential that never arrives. That story isn't truth, it's a mask, a survival mechanism formed from rejection, humiliation, and the unseen wounds of your past. But over time, that mask fused to your face, and you began to believe it was you. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So let's make it conscious. Let's remember not to relive, but to reclaim. Do you recall the first time your discipline was punished? Maybe you tried to speak up and were shamed. Maybe you showed passion and were mocked. Maybe you built something and watched it be torn down. That's where the split began, not from laziness, but from pain. Here lies the great irony. The disciplined self, the one who seeks structure and mastery, is also the most vulnerable, because discipline requires faith, and when that faith is shattered early, that part of you retreats into hiding. Jung called this the repression of the noble archetype, the inner king, warrior, or architect of order. The builder within you didn't die. He simply went underground, waiting to be reclaimed. So when you try to begin again, start a habit, stay consistent, rebuild your focus, you're not fighting laziness. You're confronting every ghost who ever told you you'd fail, every memory that whispered you never finish what you start. And unless you confront that identity, you'll repeat the cycle forever, because your failures aren't about effort, they're about self-image. You can't outwork a belief that denies who you're meant to become. You will always return to the man you believe you are, until you choose to believe in someone greater. So how do we change that belief? Not with empty affirmations or motivational noise, but through integration. Let's go deeper. Imagine two men living within you. One seeks power, structure, and legacy. He's calm, focused, sovereign. He honors his word even when no one's watching. The other craves ease, warmth, and comfort. He avoids risk, hides from failure, and longs for peace, not victory. These two men are not enemies. They are fragments of the same soul. And as long as you reject one, you remain divided. You can't destroy your undisciplined self. You must reclaim him. Speak to him. Ask, "What are you protecting me from?" Because that so-called lazy part of you isn't sabotaging your life. He's shielding you from pain, the sting of failure, the ache of being misunderstood, the memory of being dismissed when you once cared deeply. Once you understand this, discipline transforms from punishment into something sacred. It's no longer a battle, it's a homecoming, a return to the throne you abandoned, to the center of your psyche where your inner king waits. Not to dominate, but to stabilize. Carl Jung knew every man must one day meet his inner king. When that meeting happens, you stop performing, you stop chasing validation. You begin to organize your life, not to impress, but to reflect the internal hierarchy you've restored. That's what discipline truly is. It's psychological architecture, the outer structure of an inner order. When a man loses discipline, he doesn't just lose productivity, he loses identity. That's why undisciplined men feel shame even in silence. The guilt isn't about tasks left undone. It's about the man they fear they're becoming. The fractured self is a haunted place, and unless you reintegrate the lost archetypes, the builder, the warrior, the father, the sage, You'll keep chasing motivation that never arrives, because motivation was never the plan. You weren't meant to be pushed, you were meant to remember, to walk through your day as someone who's already decided, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is the order I bring. And yes, it will hurt. You'll fail, stumble, restart. But once your identity shifts, your behavior follows, because behavior flows from belief, not willpower. If you're still here, something inside you is already awakening, not the anxious, overdriven achiever, but the ancient one, the quiet builder, the steady warrior, the one who doesn't shout or boast. He simply builds in silence. But before you reclaim your discipline fully, there's one final act. Forgiveness. You must forgive yourself for the years you lost. This isn't about regret, it's about maturity. The immature man says, I'm broken, I need to be fixed. The mature man says, I am whole, I only need to be remembered. There was never anything wrong with you, you just forgot. And every time you choose structure over chaos, focus over noise, and courage over hesitation, you are not becoming someone new. You are returning to the man your younger self needed, the man your older self will thank you for. Jung taught that the highest work of life is individuation, to become whole, to unify all that you've exiled. Discipline is the bridge to that wholeness. It is how you prove to your unconscious that you are safe, steady, and sovereign once again. So I'll leave you with this question. If discipline is the throne, when will you finally sit on it? What would your life look like if you stopped living as a reaction and started living as a declaration? Because this is where the journey completes. We're going to talk about time, death, and the silent war that rages when you avoid order. And more importantly, we'll uncover the calm, unshakable strength that begins when you stop waiting to feel ready and start acting like you were born to lead. This isn't about productivity, it's about sovereignty, about becoming the ruler of your own time, your own energy, your own becoming. Time doesn't simply pass, it accumulates. Every moment you delay discipline becomes part of the architecture of your life, not just as missed opportunity, but as a brick in the structure of regret. You don't merely lose time, you are shaped by the loss. Carl Jung once said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That truth should haunt you, not to shame you, but to awaken you. Because your daily actions are already revealing who you are. Every delay, every hesitation, every excuse, these small choices sculpt the man you're becoming. And one day, most people wake up realizing the life they built is not the one they admire, it's the one they settled for. You weren't born lazy. You were taught to distrust your own strength. You were conditioned to shrink your ambition so it wouldn't threaten others or yourself. Because real discipline carries presence. It changes the energy of a room, and that weight unsettles those still asleep. That's why you began to hide, to blend in, to stay close to comfort instead of walking alone. But what if that loneliness was never punishment? What if solitude was your initiation? Jung believed that every refusal to grow is a rehearsal for death, not physical death, but the quiet decay of purpose. Every time you choose comfort over calling, you are practicing spiritual erosion, the slow fading of fire, the death of will. Discipline is your sword in that battle. It doesn't remove fear, it gives you something stronger, direction. Because everyone is disciplined, some to their distractions, some to their doubts, and a few to their destiny. The question is, to what are you disciplined? Discipline is not a grind, it's your relationship with time. Every time you choose pleasure over purpose, you're telling time, I don't respect you. And time, like any sacred force, turns against those who dishonor it. You begin to feel behind, trapped, and powerless. But the moment you realign, when you treat time as sacred, your life shifts. You begin living with rhythm, not resistance. Life stops being a reaction and becomes a ritual. You rise not out of pressure, but devotion to your vow, to your purpose, to your becoming. At its highest form, discipline becomes worship, a sacred rhythm between you and the future you've sworn to build. You train not to punish yourself, but to remember yourself. You choose structure not to control life, but to honor it. And yes, it will hurt, because to become the man you're meant to be, you must bury the one who broke his word. You must grieve the version of you who lived in avoidance. But you bury him with honor, not guilt, because he got you here. He was trying to protect you, but his time is done. When you forgive him, when you release the energy you've spent pretending, you begin to build. You build mornings rooted in clarity. You build rituals that ground you even when life shakes. Because order isn't your enemy, it's your armor. And the more chaotic the world becomes, the more sacred the calm, disciplined man becomes. This is your initiation, this heartbeat, this moment. This is where you begin. Not because you must, but because you can. Carl Jung taught that wholeness isn't achieved by adding more, but by embracing all that you are, even the parts you've disowned. You're not here to escape your chaos. You're here to lead it. When your inner world is in order, you won't just feel powerful, you'll feel at peace. Because real discipline doesn't shout, it doesn't perform, it walks quietly, daily, like a man who has finally remembered what he came here to do. So return to your vow, not tomorrow, not someday,